Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle With. And joining us, of course, is someone who is allegedly very stressed, sleepy, and tired. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bruce Prichard. Bruce, how are you, man?
Well, you know, it's funny how the news cycles go these days, isn't it?
Well, I thought it was interesting that when I said, if I had to guess, Bruce would be stressed, trying to create TV in a pandemic, 5 hours worth a week. I can't imagine how stressful that must be. And then, of course, fans are worried about WWE executive who's stressed. Is that breaking news, buddy? That working for WWE, creating live TV on broadcast television is a stressful gig? I didn't think that was that newsworthy.
Well, there's cable too.
Who could forget 3 hours of cable TV too? Man, I'm just glad that you're still able to make a little time, even though we do wind up recording these shows at the crack of dawn. So you're sleepy and tired when we do them, but we have gotten such good feedback about us revisiting the good old days, or well, maybe the not so good old days. We just did
the old days. It's just old.
There you go. Just old days. We did In Your House, the very first one on June 5th. We were back at you talking about Kevin Nash on July 10th. And today we're talking In Your House number 2 from 1995. I don't know why, man, but I feel like 1995 is like a new gold mine for us. I feel like we've spent a lot of time on this show talking about the golden era, you know, Hogan, Savage, Demolition, that sort of timeline. And then fast forward to the Attitude Era. I feel like we've spent a bunch of time there, but I don't think that we've really spent a lot of time on the transition years. And I guess 95, to use like a sports franchise term, was a bit of a rebuilding year. Fair to say?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, did you say transitional years? It's like a transitional champion. This will be the transitional year.
Well, we're coming off the horrific King of the Ring 1995 show, which we talked about a little bit on our Kevin Nash episode. Mabel has gone over, Diesel and Bam Bam Bigelow are going to main event against Sid and Tatanka. And we're moving on to In Your House 2 after King of the Ring 95. And Meltzer would write in the Observer, all that we know right now for In Your House 2 on July 23rd in Nashville is that it will have Diesel and Sid and what was advertised on television as a lumberjack match. Although there have been rumors that it may be changed to a cage match for the title on top. We'll also have Jeff Jarrett defending and probably losing the Intercontinental title to Shawn Michaels and what will be the show stealer, Bret Hart versus Hakushi, Bam Bam Bigelow versus King Kong Bundy, coming as the third show in a 9-day period following the Shamrock Severin match in the UFC, which is going down on July 14th, and the Hogan Vader cage match on July 16th. the WWF may find itself in a very rare position coming in third in a three-way race. This is something you and I haven't talked a lot about, but in the pay-per-view era, which there we go, doesn't even seem like it should be a thing. But back then your major promotions would have pay-per-views and obviously WCW is one of those and the WWF is one of those, but so is this new outfit, the UFC. And this is sort of pre-Ultimate Fighter. This is back before the UFC was more mainstream. It was still underground in the beginning stages, if you will. How much of the planning went into how do we A, avoid that same day, B, avoid the same weekend? And was there a strategy to let's get in front of them or let's be at the end of them? Like, did you guys do like A and B testing on from a financial standpoint, with the idea being that every American household doesn't have just endless amounts of disposable cash? Some folks are going to have to pick, honey, we can afford to get this one or this one and that one, but not the other one. Did that type of conversation happen when it came to competing for household dollars with all this competition in the pay-per-view landscape?
Well, I don't think that anybody was looking at UFC as competition, and it was a completely different product and something that appealed to a different audience as well. Was a crossover? Of course there was. But I think that if anything, the other folks that were doing pay-per-view were probably looking at us and wondering what we were going to do and when. However, in the same breath, we had made the commitment to go monthly. And in making the commitment to go monthly, you've got to realize at that point that you are out there and there's going to be competition from anybody and everybody. So you either have to decide to be out there or not be out there. We had made the decision, let's go for it and put our head down and move forward.
What was the thinking in trying to compete? I mean, what must it have been like for Vince, I guess is what I'm driving to, that now he finds himself competing with his own creation of sorts. I mean, I know that Hulk Hogan was a thing before he came to Vince, but with Vince's help, Hulk Hogan became a household name, and it sort of becomes a chicken and the egg conversation, I guess, because people argue, you know, who helped make who. Well, clearly both helped each other. But now when Vince is sort of struggling to find his next big thing and get a guy over like he has before with Hulk Hogan, he also finds himself competing with Hulk Hogan. And we say on the show all the time that you guys used to ask when it came to marketing someone like Bret or perhaps even Diesel, what would we do for Hogan? And now while you're trying to sort of recreate the magic from Hogan, damn it, he's a competitor for you too. That's got to be a catch-22 type situation.
It is. And more than anything, I think that it probably hurt Vince that he was even in that position of having to deal with Hulk on this side of the fence. So I think you take care of your own business. You just look at your own shop and go from there. And probably one of the biggest deterrents to what we did over the years was acknowledging Turner and trying to, discredit them, if you will, and talk about them, because we just gave them more and more publicity. By acknowledging them and moving on, it gives them more publicity. And when we just said, you know what, they're going to be there, screw it, take care of your own business and focus on what it is that you do best and not what everybody else does. Because in history, you go down and you look at every single one of those promoters that when Vince made his national expansion, Vince went to all of them, tried to buy them out or bring them in. They all said, you know what? No, man, I'm going to put you out of business. They started focusing on Vince and what Vince was doing, and they forgot about what they had at home, and they stopped taking care of it. And that's the reason that the local promoters went out of business, and the reason that they weren't able to continue to do business for all those years, because they were, okay, you're going to come into Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Well, then by God, we're going to go into New York City. And but that's what they did. Jim Crockett sitting there in Charlotte wasn't happy being the king of Charlotte and being the king of the East Coast, on the southern end. Wanted to go into, oh, by God, I'll come into New York City. So that was the downfall of the Jim Crockett Promotions. It was the downfall of Bill Watts. Jerry Jarrett, for as much as he lacks a lot in acumen, at least just stayed in Tennessee and didn't venture out.
And made money.
Well, for himself.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Nobody else did, but he did. Let's talk about somebody else who's making the news here. Meltzer would write, it appears that the Ultimate Warrior will be making his first wrestling appearance in the United States in almost 2.5 years on July 22nd for promoter TC Martin in Las Vegas. In this era, you would occasionally hear, oh, the Ultimate Warrior's coming back, but he's doing this shot in Las Vegas, or he's going to be over here in Australia or whatever. These sort of random one-off Ultimate Warrior appearances, promoters were rolling the dice in a big way, I'm sure giving him a major payday in the process. And it would create a little bit of at least underground buzz. And that has to be attractive to Vince, even though Vince knows, hey man, this has not worked multiple times now. But every time somebody mentions his name, it gets attention. And by God, that's what we're looking for. Does that even cross Vince's mind here in 95? Or are you so fresh on the previous sort of back and forth lawsuit situation? And maybe it's just not in the budget. You just know economically what he's going to ask for, and where our business is right now, we can't even have that conversation. What can you tell us about that? Do you think Vince had any sort of interest in this newfound underground buzz about, oh, the Ultimate Warrior might be back?
Well, we just thought to whoever had him, good luck, and thank God it's you and not us.
Let's talk about something going on at the Raw tapings in June. Meltzer says, we don't have any details on the Raw taping on June 26th in Danville, PA, other than what aired live. In the TV main event, Jarrett retained his title, getting a DQ against Vega when the roadie interfered. Michaels, who was doing commentary with Lawler absent, wound up fighting with Rhodey just before the finish and ended up cleaning house on both Rhodey and Jarrett to start the build for the IC title match. Jarrett was really good in carrying the match. They announced Bigelow versus Sid as a TV main event for July 3rd. Lawler did an interview with the new storyline basically being that because of what Hart did to him, his breath is bad and his teeth are in rough shape, and his dentist, Dr. Isaac Yankem, is so mad he's coming to the WWF to get revenge on Bret Hart. Lawler said Yankem used to be a pro wrestler under an assumed name, which makes me think it will be Shane Douglas. We'll know for sure by next week. So Meltzer freestyles a guess that the evil dentist will be Shane Douglas. It turns out, no, Shane Douglas is going to be an evil teacher. The mayor of Knox County is going to be the evil dentist. Tell everybody the gimmick behind how we got this name, Isaac Yankem.
Is it just now that you're figuring out that Meltzer was taking a guess? It's all he ever has done. It's all he ever will do is just guess because he doesn't know. And the report, well, we don't have any reports other than what I got to see on TV because I didn't know a fan in the area to give me their dirt or their opinion. So anyway, what the fuck was the question? No, Isaac Yankem. Isaac Yankem was something, I've had a lot of dental work and different things done over the years. So the one thing I've always kept in my back of my mind was old Dr. I Yankem. That's his name, Isaac Yankem. I Yankem. And that's an old Bobby Heenan joke that he loved that, just talking about his dentist whenever he'd go to. You're going to go see Dr. Yankem. Isaac Yankem. I Yankem. Ha, 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 ha. And it was just one of those characters that literally everybody, no matter how old you are, has a dentist story.
Yeah, nobody wants to go to the dentist.
Most people, you won't go to the dentist?
I said most people don't want to go to the dentist. I go twice a year every year.
Yeah, well, after my last experiences, I'm reconsidering that too.
What is it with when all of my podcast co-hosts go to work for Vince, their teeth start falling out? What's up? What's at the water cooler up there in the office?
No, mine were falling out when.
It didn't help when Brock Lesnar broke your face either. I mean,
that didn't help either.
No.
It's
just funny to me that this evil dentist became a thing. And this was very much in the occupational era of gimmicks, if you will. But it's just, I don't know. It's fun to look back at the tremendous career that Kane had and know that once upon a time, Jim Cornette made him dress up like a Christmas tree and Vince McMahon made him dress up like an evil dentist. And he came out.
Jim Cornette didn't do that. That was Jerry Jarrett.
Okay. My apologies. He's a fucking mayor now. Meltzer would say, rumor has it Dustin Rhodes signed this past week and should be in shortly. You guys already had the idea for Goldust ahead of that. We've talked about that in the archives. You go listen to our Dustin Rhodes episode. It is an epic episode, like 5 or 6 hours worth. Meltzer would also say lots of talk regarding Titan and the USA Network, but my feeling is it's all talk. Meltzer would say that Titan's contract with the USA Network was set to expire at the end of December. And the story that's been reported in many places is the current deal for 3 shows is that USA pays Titan $12,000 a week and Titan gets to keep 2 minutes of advertising time to either sell or for its own use. Titan wants that increased to 5 minutes of advertising time and is using the E network as negotiating leverage. Monday Night Raw is on a phenomenal ratings run, with it often being the highest rated regular weekly show on cable. Ratings of the other 2 shows, while nowhere near that level, are competitive for their time slot. However, the E network only reaches about 28 million homes as opposed to 65 million homes for the USA Network. So really there's no leverage there at all. With syndication dwindling, Titan simply can't afford that kind of a loss in exposure. So it just isn't going to happen. So this is one of the first times that I remember Vince trying to figure out a new TV deal. And man, I hope that you take that piece of the notes and you show that to Vince, that once upon a time you were getting $12,000 a week. Oh my God. It's a whole new ball game now. Is it not, my friend?
It's a little bit different ball game altogether, just in every landscape. So yes, without a doubt, it was different times and different ways of looking at the business. But at the same time, it was not just settling for what you had and saying, okay, well, we've got this deal. It was still going out looking for a better deal financially. And look, even then, based on the way that networks were paying for programming from syndication to cable and everywhere in between, it was, what about us? You know, great. You're paying us a small production fee is kind of how I looked at it. But they should have been paying more back then too.
Of course.
And it takes a while sometimes.
I mean, really, it is remarkable to think about how far the wrestling business has come. That once upon a time, the biggest around was only getting $12,000 a week, allegedly, and keeping 2 minutes of advertising time, which is, oof, night and day from where we are right now. Did you guys have any sort of hesitation, you know, when you know that Vince is trying to leverage the E network, but we also know that that show is a fraction of the size of USA Network? Was there any concern that, man, we might be on the verge of losing the USA deal?
I think every time that the contract came up for renewal, there was talk of, you know, should we stay or should we go? And is the grass greener on the other side?
Right.
That, look, if you're in business, you have to do that. Otherwise you're cheating yourself. And I would dare say those conversations take place every time that contract would have come around.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it just feels like, especially when because here's the thing, although it's easy to look at that and say, well, they're just getting 12 grand in a couple of minutes of commercials. No, they're really getting an opportunity to sell pay-per-view, to sell live events, to sell merch, to grow their brand and expose themselves to this huge audience. So there's more to it than just the money. But money is obviously something that's very important in this era, and nobody knows that perhaps better than Matt Osborne. Meltzer is going to write that the company would file suit against him. He's 37 years old and the former Doink the Clown. And Meltzer would write, Titan is asking a federal judge to order Osborne, who now lives in Elwood City, Pennsylvania, to stop using the Doink name and gimmick on independent shows. According to the lawsuit, Osborne, who was better known in his pre-Doink days as second generation wrestler Maniac Matt Bourne, had promised Titan he would stop appearing as Doink, but has refused to put that in writing. Titan is claiming trademark infringement because Osborne appeared as Doink, among other places, April 21st in Elwood City and March 17th at Plum High School near Pittsburgh. Titan attorney Jerry McDivitt was quoted in an article in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, easy for me to say, saying Titan would go to court if necessary against anyone using the Doink name and gimmick. My God, dude. Why does the company care? This feels like we're throwing resources and money after something that in the scheme of things is rather insignificant. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah.
Tell me why I'm wrong.
Do you want somebody opening up a First Family Mortgage down the street from you?
Buddy, if they want to dress themselves up like a clown and do it in front of a couple hundred people at a Plum High School near Pittsburgh, wear it out. Cause it fucking don't matter.
If you let them do it there, then they're going to be able, you have to let them do it in Huntsville. You got to let them do it in Birmingham. You got to let them do it in New York City. If you don't do something about it, it's IP. It's creation that we came up with, that we own, that we invested in. So, as has been the case, taking that creation and had other people portray that character because the creation was something that we did.
McDivitt came out really strong in the newspaper though, saying that the real thing that they're trying to avoid is getting some stink on themselves because Matt Bourne has run into some legal problems. He was arrested on June 13th, charged with a domestic abuse claim from a dispute with his girlfriend, jailed in his hometown of Elwood City, released 2 days later on $1,000 bond. Either way though, the quote from Jerry is, this guy was arrested and people think, oh, that's Titan's character. Titan is very concerned about the image of its wrestlers. That's part of the reason you don't want people using your trademark because it dilutes the meaning of your trademark. Matt Bourne is a guy we've talked a lot about in our Doink episode, which is available in the archives, but it's sad to see that a guy with this much talent at 37 years old, he's got himself in a bit of a mess here, and it doesn't feel like he's going to pull the nose up.
No, and it's really sad because Matt was such a great talent, and Matt was someone that could offer so much, not just to the product at the time, but Matt was one of those unique talent that was able to teach and able to take somebody and groom them coming up and be able to explain why he did what he did and where to put certain things in matches and what makes sense and what doesn't. So from that perspective, Matt was missed. And I think that Matt could have done a whole lot more for himself and for the business.
Meltzer would update the card here, and he would say the latest information for In Your House 2 from Nashville is that Diesel versus Sid will be a lumberjack with 30 lumberjacks. Some of these names include Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Duke Drosay, Man Mountain Rock, Techno Team 2000, and a lot of others, but those really stood out to me. Of course, who could forget Mantar? He would also say, thank you for that. 2 matches have been changed in regards to the local hype in Nashville. The Bigelow King Kong Bundy match wasn't announced on TV and may be dropped since Bundy has been out of action lately, apparently from pneumonia. Bret Hart's opponent has been switched from Hakushi to Lafitte. And also on the show will be Jeff Jarrett versus Shawn for the Intercontinental title, with Jarrett doing a live concert of the song that he's done on video. Apparently there will be a screw up with the lip syncing to reveal that it's really Rhodey who's been doing the singing, and it was Rhodey's voice and Jarrett just lip syncing. Rhodey will take on 1, 2, 3 Kid. Owen Hart will team up with Yokozuna to defend the tag titles against Davey Boy and Lex Luger. While the switch from Hakushi to, quote unquote, the pirate, it feels like
this goddamn pirate stole his jacket.
I'm with you on that, but I'm saying you guys scripted
Dude,
that.
you got to throw down if somebody steals your jacket, man. Ben Pareja.
Oh my God. I just, selfishly, I wish we would have gotten a little more Bret Hakushi. Not so much for you.
No, I would have loved to have had more Bret and Hakushi as well. I thought that they had good chemistry and good matches, but the feeling overall was at this time, it felt like Bret just wanted to, have matches and be done, eat up opponents pretty quickly. So after their match, it just felt like, damn, what else you going to do? Wasn't a lot left. There wasn't a whole lot left for Hakushi to do or get any heat.
A big part of what we're going to be talking about today is Jeff Jarrett and the way he's going to wind up leaving the World Wrestling Federation. But this is the first time that I would read, in this particular issue of the Observer, that there is a concert planned where they're going to reveal that not only did Jeff lose his title, but he's also been exposed. He's a fraud. He wasn't singing. It was the roadie. When did you get the inclination or the feeling that, we might have a problem with Jeff?
Literally not until that night.
Okay.
If anybody tells you any different, and I know Jeff has got a different side of the story. The only thing was that he never indicated to any of us, when I say any of us, specifically myself or Pat Patterson, who had pretty much been given him this story all the way along. And this was not something that was just sprung on him or anybody else. It was a story that we had laid out for quite some time.
Meltzer would also say that on those same tapings in Danville on June 26th, besides the live hour of Raw that aired that night, they also had Lex Luger and Davey Boy going over Henry Godwinn and Tatanka, with Tatanka being pinned because, of course, we need Henry Godwinn protected. The 1, 2, 3 Kid returned and looked pretty damn good for a guy who broke his neck 2 months ago. That, according to Dave Meltzer. He also says that Waylon Mercy debuted, and here's the way he described the gimmick. His gimmick is interesting as he shakes hands with the ref and his opponent and then goes psycho during the match using the sleeper as a finisher. His wrestling is really bad though. I did think it's fun that this is the first time we see Waylon Mercy, and that's the takeaway. He shakes their hands and then he goes psycho. I mean, I guess that's kind of the write-up if you had to describe it, but it does feel like the character is so much more than that.
Yeah. He was a very sick and demented individual that once you get into the arena and you get into the match and everything starts, there's something that snaps in him that makes him go crazy. But outside, he's a very deceptive individual in that you want to trust him because he's so damn nice and he can be a very charming person. So coming down, I will embrace all of the fans. I'll embrace the referee as well as my opponent. But you just don't know what to make of him.
In the main event that airs on July 3rd, Sid's going to beat Bam Bam Bigelow when Godwinn pushes Bigelow off the top rope. And after the match, Sid powerbombs Bigelow as well. Is the bloom off the rose for Bigelow at this point? I mean, we're not too terribly far removed from WrestleMania where he's main eventing against Lawrence Taylor, but now we've got Sid beating him and a powerbomb afterwards, and looks like Godwinn's going to be involved. How much influence is this of backstage politics, or why is Bigelow scooting down the cards?
I don't know there's anything to do with backstage politics. It's more of an issue of Shawn turning babyface and being on that side when we had been looking at Bigelow, kind of being that new babyface that was going to emerge after WrestleMania. And when Shawn emerged, it was, you've only got so much of a spotlight to share. Shawn stepped into that spotlight and Shawn took it and ran with it. And I don't think that Bam Bam was somebody that, really took it and ran with it the way that he could have. And it just was kind of fizzled out more than anything. We were expecting Bam Bam to have a lot more momentum coming out of WrestleMania.
Oh, man. Let's keep going. The Superstars taping on June 27th in Bethlehem, PA included the debut of the Jarrett video, which was really good. During a skip squash, Sonny said,
"You remember that video?
How did it go, Bruce? What was the gist of it? Do you recall?"
Yeah. Well, goddamn, I'm going to have to go back and spend my days working hard on the go, but the hands on the clock keep spinning too slow. I can't wait to be alone with my baby tonight. My baby's got me wrapped around her little finger. And that I would walk through hell and back to be with her. 'Cause I can't wait to be alone with my baby tonight.
Where did y'all produce that video? Do you recall?
Yeah, studio.
Oh, that was all at the studio?
Yeah.
I thought there was some sort of stage or something with folks there. I didn't realize it was.
Oh, you mean the
music video?
That was at a little club in Connecticut somewhere. That we just kept doing it over and over, and then the rest of it was done in the studio.
Let's talk about something.
Turn the lights off, bolt the door. We'll leave every worry in the world behind.
How many more times do you think we're going to hear that on SmackDown?
I don't know.
I got to tell you, my phone blew up when it happened most recently, and everybody was like, "Oh, we know who booked this shit." Which made me laugh because I don't know that song would be as popular or over or whatever if you hadn't started singing it like a goof on this show 4 years ago.
Why I gotta sing like a goof? I'm a damn good singer.
That's true.
Well, stupid honey,
Okay.
what do you say? I got a brand new record.
God.
I gotta play. She
Make it
says,
stop.
"Not now, boy, but I did
Shit.
anyway, 'cause I'm ready."
Let's talk about Godwinn here. On this Superstars taping on July 27th, Meltzer would say the only real angle was during a Godwinn Adam Bomb match, which only went 41 seconds. Godwinn, after a double countout finish, poured the slop bucket on Adam Bomb. How excited was Vince for the slop bucket? This feels like a Vince-ism all day.
Love the slop bucket. It was great. It was nasty. It was something that a hog farmer would do. You got to carry around your bucket of slop. By God, somebody's going to get slopped.
What? I don't even know what to say. Well, I mean, obviously, Henry Godwinn is a very imposing figure, even in real life now. Like, he is a fucking man mountain. I saw him a few years ago at a convention and I did a double take like that. Looks like that kid, holy shit, he's still a big man. Vince is in love with the gimmick or the size and the slot bucket. What was it about Henry O that he thought was going to be a hit? Is this the new, more badass hillbilly Jim? Chat me up.
Yeah, I think, going back in time and you look at some of the characters throughout the years, like Haystacks Calhoun, Hillbilly Jim is a good one. That those down home characters really resonated with the audience, and Henry O. Godwinn was someone that we were looking to kind of step up and take that place, but we'd never had a mean hog farmer before. And the idea behind it was to tap into a nasty side of Henry and just see that he can be pretty damn mean-spirited and get out there with, a different edge in his work and his promos and let his promos be a little sick. But at the end of it, kind of like the snake, you didn't get the snake on you, you got the slop.
Let's keep it going. There's Challenge and Action Zones tapings happening on July 28th. And this is pretty notable because we're going to get Barry Horowitz pinning Skip here when Skip's doing push-ups and Horowitz does a side roll for the pin. After the match, Skip would demand a rematch and Horowitz said he couldn't beat him within 10 minutes. I don't know if they did a rematch that night or they're saving it for the road, but the gimmick is they tease a time limit, but Skip wins in like 9 minutes and 55 seconds. Debuting was Spellbinder from Memphis, doing a magician-like gimmick, either as Maurice the Magnificent or Magnificent Maurice. My God, there's so much on this set of tapings. Let's start with the magician first. Chat me up on the magician gimmick.
Well, Kingfish, Jerry Lawler had a guy. His name was Del something.
Del Rios.
Del Rios. And he's a magician. Oh my God, it's great. He does these magic tricks during the match. And what if we could do this? What if we could do that? So we started thinking about the possibility and the endless possibility of a real magician being able to do things in the middle of a match, like make someone disappear and 1, 2, and he's gone. Hey, I'm over here. Yeah, illusion and magic is a little bit different. Needs a lot more setup and a lot more talent than Del Rios had. So we did, this was his debut, just see what the hell was there. And God damn. It's another one of those fucking bell rang, man. And he had to do something. And it was the
Fantasio. Am I saying it right? That's what you guys were calling him?
Phantasmo or Fantasia or something like that.
I think it's Fantasio.
Yeah. It was El Shito. He was horrible, but his magic. Do you know who Marshall Brodeen is?
No.
Okay. Well, some of our older fans, when I was a kid, there used to be a commercial on TV, Saturday morning cartoons, and you'd wake up and you'd watch that cartoon block from 7 a.m. till like
the guy who sold magic on TV.
It was Marshall Brodeen. Hey, get your Marshall Brodeen magic kit, and you can do magic just like the pros. And he had the mark cards. He had all the little fucking simple magic tricks in there and all this shit. So a kid down the street where we live put on a magic show for us one day. And it's just kids in the neighborhood, went up to, his house, and he had the whole thing set up. And I remember he poured rice into a newspaper, like curled up into a cone. And then he poured Rice Krispies out on the other side. And after seeing that, man, I had to be a magician. I went right home and I got a newspaper and I curled the newspaper up and I poured a bunch of rice in the thing. And I said the right words. I did all the shit that he did. And when I poured it out, I still had rice. And then I explained to my mom that the reason I only had rice was because I didn't have a Marshall Brodeen magic kit. And if I could only get my hands on one of these, I'll be able to take care of the whole damn family. Until I was old enough to get my wrestling license. Because I could be a magician as a kid. I knew I could do it. Well, Fantasio, I think, still fucking was working off of that Marshall Brodeen fucking magic kit. And it was the shits. He just had the shit that came out of his mouth. He had little poppers and shit that... It was terrible. And then the fucker set Gorilla on fire with his liquid fire shit. Now think about that. Now think about this. This son of a bitch had a bottle, and it was called liquid fire. So that with this liquid, you could make fire with it. You know, it was a magician thing. Doesn't tell anybody what the fuck he's going to do. We're in a small little, like, high school doing TV. My gorilla position is inside on the gym floor, where you're warned 400 times a day whenever you're in one of those, don't fuck up my gym floor. And I've got curtains around me, a lot of electrical equipment. And this son of a bitch dropped his bottle of liquid fire. Well, whenever this shit makes contact, or whatever the hell the dynamic was, he set Gorilla on fire.
Gorilla Monsoon is on actual fire.
No. The Gorilla position.
Okay.
If Gorilla Monsoon had been on fire, we wouldn't be talking about... That's not what we would be talking about right now. We would be talking about the day that Del Rios got his ass whooped by a fucking 60-year-old man. I didn't think Gino was that old at the time. But still, like, it's going up. And the truck is calling, where is he? Where is he? I said, hey, man, this stupid fucker just set Gorilla on fire. I need fire extinguishers, somebody here now, because I can't get out. Because I'm cornered and the fire is around me. And this guy's standing there with his hands out like, oh shit, I set this on fire. I've never worked like this before. So finally somebody came, their little fire extinguisher thing right there. Sent him out to go have his match. He came back. I said, what the fuck were you thinking? I said, forget about the fact that you damn near killed me and set me on fire and the whole rest of the gym. What made you think that you could just walk out there and do fire tricks? We're in an enclosed place. There's a fire marshal. We don't spring this kind of shit up on fire marshals and just say, oh, it's a trick, it's TV. Because obviously, that's real fucking fire. Obviously, all this shit burnt around here is from that fucking fire. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, he was a wonderful piece of work.
What a weird gimmick. I mean, to be clear, we've now got a pig farmer, a garbage man, an evil dentist, a half man, half beast, and now a magician.
A shitty magician.
Perhaps the biggest magician of all, though, Barry Horowitz finally getting a win. This was all over my feed last week because we just passed, or a couple weeks ago rather. But we just passed the anniversary of this, and my goodness, he finally gets a win, and it is a moment, is it not?
Yeah, it was a great moment. I mean, it was something different. They think that whenever they see Barry Horowitz in the ring, that it's going to be a loss for Barry, and for him to win and catch that upset was a huge deal. Got a tremendous pop. They went banana.
Let's, I mean, I think this is, I mean, I know that in hindsight, some people would say, oh, what's the big deal? But at the time, Barry Horowitz was he was like What George South was to Crockett TV, Barry Horowitz was even more on WWF TV. He was the perennial underneath guy, enhancement talent. He's here to take your finishes and sell for you and make you look good. And then holy shit, he wins one. The fans are really, really excited, and he had to have the right opponent for it. And man, did Skip and Sonny sell it well. I thought this was very well done, and it was fun to watch.
It was very well done, and it came from a deal that we had done in Global where Barry was the winner and won one match, and we made him a championship out of tuna fish cans in a weight belt, I believe it was, but it was, yeah, I thought it was pretty good.
It was good. I enjoyed it. We'll try to find a clip and share it on our social over at Prichard Show. Meltzer would write, the Head Shrinkers have been broken up. Fatu is getting a new gimmick with the same name, now being from San Francisco, which is a shoot as a street gang type of guy, telling kids to stay in school and not use drugs. Boy, Fatu with this gimmick didn't stand a chance, did he?
Well, no, it was actually something he really wanted to do. And it was something that he felt very passionate about by going out and talking to the kids and being a part of his community. And living in San Francisco, there was a lot of gang violence, and he felt that, hey, if we could have this character on television, it may add a little bit more credibility and credence to what he was doing in real life.
Let's talk about some news and notes that make the Observer in mid-July. The end of a mythical era in WWF came to an end on Wednesday when President Jack Tunney resigned, at least according to WWF Storyline. Both Tunney and his longtime associate Billy Red Lyons out of the Toronto office are no longer affiliated with the WWF due to the company wanting to more aggressively promote and build up other avenues of business, such as merchandising throughout Canada. It was part of a major week-long house cleaning of the WWF front office, which saw numerous key people in the promotions, public relations, and pay-per-view departments let go, including bigwigs like Rex Lardner, Skip. Boy, you're gonna have to help me with the last name here, Bruce. Desjardins?
Skip Desjardins.
Okay, there you go. I'd have never gotten that one. What about Steve Planamenta? How's that one? The WWF hadn't released any official statement or comment regarding these cutbacks, which some within wrestling are attributing to Titan's immense legal bills and real estate costs as the downturn of the wrestling industry. While there are no figures available that I'd consider reliable enough to print as far as King of the Ring, within wrestling, it is widely being said it was the lowest buy rate in company history, and those within the company have termed both the apparent lack of buys and the poor choice or poor show as a major wake-up call to the promotion. The company will now open up a new Canadian office, which will be headed by Carl DeMarco, the former business agent of Bret Hart. Tunney and Lyons had run the WWF operations in Ontario since '84, when Tunney had a falling out with Jim Crockett Jr. and ended his business relationship with the Crockett office. Tunney, whose Uncle Frank was a legendary promoter during the heyday of Toronto, where crowds would routinely flock to 15,000 or more at the Maple Leaf Gardens every other Sunday afternoon for 12-match shows headlined by 3-minute main events by the Sheik, had taken over the business when Frank passed away. Frank Tunney and Vince McMahon Sr. were longtime friends, and both men and even their wives took wrestling vacations together. So a big shakeup. Most of these names are not going to be familiar to us fans, with the exception of Jack Tunney. I mean, he was the figurehead president of the company or head of the company for, it felt like, my entire life up to this point. I guess he was. But I guess maybe the bigger shakeup are some of these other names. What can you tell us about Steve, Rex, or Skip?
Not much. I mean, they were three guys in the office that not really much to them. Steve was the PR guy. Rex was like marketing and PR. Just kind of revamping of that particular department. And as far as Jack Tunney goes, it was a strategic move for Canada. Jack wasn't necessarily interested in promoting all of Canada, especially on the West End. Vancouver, Calgary, places like that, that Jack wanted to do Toronto. Jack wanted to do Toronto in his area, and that was it. The offer was made to Jack to work with us and to continue working with us and be a part of the company, and that wasn't something that Jack was interested in doing if he didn't have all of Toronto. And it was no different than any other place that we had co-promoters in. That, look, we were changing the way that we do business, and Jack didn't want to be a part of that change and felt it was better for him to leave rather than stay around and participate in something that he didn't want to do.
What does that mean? Participate in something he didn't want to do?
Jack didn't want to promote anyplace else other than Toronto. Jack didn't want to go to Vancouver and promote shows, or Montreal and all those other places. Jack just wanted to stay in Toronto. So he didn't want to be a part of anything else and just wanted to have his own little area there, Hamilton, Ontario, and things like that. So
I guess my question is,
I'm interested in doing more.
I'm not asking this to be stupid, but help me out, because I don't understand. What other option does he have? Like, if this is his primary, was this his primary income? Like, it's not like at this point WCW is going to start running Toronto, or did he think maybe since they had Hogan they would?
I don't know really what his thinking was, but it was. I also think that Jack was pretty well off and didn't need it. He had a very successful career, and it was something that he wasn't looking to, necessarily do for the rest of his life. And maybe at that point, he just wanted to retire too. And this kind of helped nudge him in that direction.
Well, let's talk about how Carl DeMarco gets the gig. We're familiar with him. We saw him through some of those late 90s, early 2000s documentaries. If you were a fan, I'm sure you saw some of those references, and he's going to become a name that at least a lot of us were familiar with. But I saw here, he's the business manager of Bret Hart. That's how you guys were first introduced to him?
Yeah, it was, there are a lot of discrepancies as far as how Carl DeMarco came to be, but that he was driving Bret around and he was a friend of Bret's, and next thing you know, he was doing bookings for Bret outside of, wrestling and what have you, autograph sessions and just different things like that. But Carl came into the office with a business plan and a way to promote the entire country of Canada. Carl had a plan to do things and branch out, do some more. Very aggressive plan. Carl was one of these guys that always liked to have press conferences before the shows and things like that, and just a very aggressive promoter. And the plan made a lot more sense than what we had been doing, which seemed to be the status quo. So as far as Carl goes, it was looked at as, here's a businessman that is trying to come in and actually has a plan, and someone that is going to help grow our business in Canada. Another thing that was happening at the time was, for Canadian television, you had to have so much Canadian content in all your TV, which is another reason we always had a lot of Canadian wrestlers and what have you. But this also, we put an office in Canada that promoted, and that was our place of business for Canada. It wasn't Connecticut anymore. So that was another thing. Jack didn't want to go into an office every day. So that's, pretty much the gist of it, is that we were setting up shop in Canada, and Jack wasn't really too thrilled about setting up shop.
Let's take a minute and just talk about the Tunney relationship. I mean, knowing that Frank Tunney and Vince McMahon Sr. were so tight, does Vince feel some sort of obligation to keep that going? We've often heard that quote unquote junior, and he's not really a junior, but the Vince that we all know really looked after folks who meant a lot to his dad. And I realize that this is the son of that person, but I guess that only carries you so far. Or did he really struggle with, man, this has been part of our family business for so long, I'm really not sure what to do here. I mean, previously, he had worked for or done some stuff with Crockett, so it's not like they had always been together. Talk me through that.
Well, I think that it just is a changing in times. And at some point, you have to change. Yeah. You have to change or you die. And it was that time. It wasn't anything personal. It wasn't anything that Jack Tunney had done or Billy Red had done. Nothing like that. It was just a case of, hey guys, times are changing. Either get on board or thank you very much for your time here and we'll move along.
Before we talk about who's going to replace Tunney, and what the speculation is, I do want to ask, when we mentioned the other three names, specifically Steve, Rex, and Skip, you said, oh, we were just, going to have a different approach towards PR and things like that. Is it simply based on, hey, we're going to have a paradigm shift about the way we approach these facets of our business? Or is the driving factor in this decision, hey man, we're not as profitable as we used to be. We need to tighten our belt. That's what's economically and fiscally responsible.
Well, it's a little bit of all the above, but at the same time, when you're looking at the way you're doing business, we were changing the way that we were doing business and trying to streamline things. So either you fit or you didn't.
Here's where I'm getting at that. It feels like we've heard in various shoot interviews from guys like Jim Cornette, where he would say, man, Vince believes perception is reality. When you go in and you start making these cuts from longtime folks who were staples in the office, none
of those guys were longtime folks that were staples in the office.
Okay. So it didn't affect the perception. My wonder is, when you make a cut like this, the guys start looking around and saying, shit, do I need to call WCW and see if I can get some of that sweet, sweet Ted Turner money?
I don't really know. I think that there are people that may have thought that, but at the same time, if we're getting rid of them, is that something that WCW really is going to want? Maybe they do. Well, that's how they did their business model for a long time. If you work for WWE, well, shit, we want you.
No,
don't know what you do, but we'll take you.
I mean, that's what happened in '95, dude. They took all the cast offs, and that was my wonder is, is there some uncertainty that people start to get a little nervous? Meltzer would talk about the figurehead role here. He says, with Tunney and the WWF parting ways, the figurehead president role will be going to someone new. And on TV, there were hints that there will be an angle coming out of the decision-making process. It's already been speculated that Shane Douglas's initial role with the promotion could be as a heel commissioner, and eventually he'd be parlayed into being a heel wrestler. Douglas has not yet signed as of press time, but it was still considered by both sides as a 95% possibility that it would happen. By the way,
he's on top of shit with Shane Douglas. He's going to be the dentist. Now he's going to be the figurehead.
Dude, that tickled me. Like, he's going to be the evil dentist / president. Meltzer would freestyle here, and this was a great idea. Wouldn't Bob Backlund be an awesome choice for this figurehead president role? If you wanted to have like a heel authority figure, how great would it have been to have Bob Backlund doing that in '95?
Bobby could have done a good job. Yeah.
Let's talk about something else that really caught my attention. WWF President Linda McMahon sent out a business statement on July 11th, stressing a need to constantly adapt to marketplace changes, talking about going direct merchandising through online services, and that licensing and international television deals have exceeded projections, and that the first In Your House exceeded internal projections. In regard to the changes, McMahon wrote, quote, "We are moving forward, but we must consolidate and streamline some areas and change the management systems in order to operate efficiently. Some positions will be lost, and the transition phase will require everyone's cooperation. When additions are necessary for growth, they will be added." So this is basically her saying, we got to become more efficient. And that means some of you got to go, with the hope that, hey, when business picks up, you can come back. Do you think when those three names in particular that we mentioned, Steve, Rex, and Skip, do you think they left thinking, hey, maybe there's a chance to come back when business turns around? Or was this see you later, although that means never?
I think actually Steve came back at some point.
I thought so, because I remember seeing his name. It feels like later in the 90s.
Yeah, but I think that they all thought that there's a possibility of coming back, but no promise.
Is this the era where you've joked about, or it's been joked about, that Vince even removed the water coolers from headquarters?
I think this was about that time. You know, that seems to be much bigger news to people like Dave Meltzer and Eric Bischoff that love to talk about. They even took the water coolers out.
What year was it? You've told me before. I don't even think we were recording a show. We were just talking in real life about sort of the ebbs of WWF business and how sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not. Vince don't sell shit for nobody, blah, blah, blah. But there was a moment of frustration you told me about once where you said, I had to pull whatever number of millions out of my ass. When was that?
I mean, that was right in this time. And it was
tell the story for our listeners who've never heard it.
Well, people think that Vince is this horrible human being that, whose middle name is Beelzebub, and that he just didn't care about people, didn't care about anything but the bottom line. And it was during a time we were not a publicly held company, and Vince and Linda privately held that company. And when the company's losing money, Vince was taking out of his own pocket while losing millions of dollars, and would make sure that everyone was paid each pay period out of his own ass, out of his own side, privately funding that. But his thing was, he wasn't going to miss a payday for people, because he had too many people that were depending on him. And that was a level of frustration that he just had to keep putting back into the company instead of just folding up shop and saying, okay, shit, we're losing too much money. I think Vince would have put every single penny he had in the company and mortgaged everything he owned and found ways to get loans to do it. But Vince didn't want to do that, didn't want to mortgage everything to the hilt and borrow a bunch of money. He wanted to make sure that he did it himself. So yeah, the money came out of his ass, and the money came from him specifically. So yeah, it was a major frustration.
It's so remarkable. I mean, when you really think about it, imagine for a minute if Vince had said, okay, my financial advisors and all the people who help me manage my personal wealth have said that, this is not good for me. And I've had a conversation with my wife, and she's agreed that we need to just take our purse and go home, because they had built amassed an incredible personal wealth, but now the business is losing money. And so Vince is pulling money out of his own personal coffers, out of his personal investments, and funding the company with it because it's literally losing cash. And I think he probably could have gotten some advice from different folks to say, yes, you could cut X, Y, and Z, and maybe that would make it more palatable. But Vince, with this large sum of wealth you've accumulated for yourself, why are you fooling with this? Why don't you just go rest on your laurels a little bit and come up with a new idea in a few years, take a few years off? And wrestling, by and large, would have been different forever. And I don't know that it would exist the way it does now had Vince not dug into his personal coffers, because it's not like WCW at this point was exactly innovating.
No. But Vince had faith in what the hell, he wanted to do, and knew that he could do it. So,
and passion for wrestling. I mean, I know that sometimes wrestling fans online will say, oh, Vince hates wrestling. Clearly he doesn't hate the wrestling business, because if you hated the wrestling business, this is your excuse to leave. It's losing money. Wash your hands of it. It's no longer a cash cow. But to throw your own cash behind it tells me he has a passion for this.
Well, without a doubt, he wouldn't be in it all this time if he didn't.
Let's talk about some other changes that are going to be happening. Meltzer would say, besides the employee comebacks, come August, there will be major changes made in the way they do TV. They've already moved from doing tapings every 3 weeks to every 4 weeks, doing 4 Raws and 4 Superstars at every taping. The Wrestling Challenge is being dropped in the fall. WWF was facing cancellation of the show in both New York and Los Angeles markets and had weak times in most other markets, so they felt the cost of doing the third day of taping just wasn't worth the exposure they were getting. The show had been almost a throwaway for the past several months, with the only newsworthy items coming from most challenge tapings being Action Zone main events, which had for the most part been discontinued the past few weeks. Action Zone, which consisted of the challenge matches plus an added main event, will stay on USA, but with a format change. In markets where Titan had a second syndication clearance, they will do a highlight show, which may be called Challenge or Spotlight or something else, but it'll be a spotlight format with all the major angles from either Superstars or Raw. The tapings will always come the Monday and Tuesday after a pay-per-view show, and that way they will never publicly tip their hand as to a pay-per-view finish the way WCW constantly does. That's a little note, but I appreciate that we're not going to do that, because we used to, in this era, see a series of tapings in Orlando from WCW, and different guys would show up wearing the same belts and be introduced as champions, because this is going to happen 2 months from now or 3 months from now or 4 months from now, what have you. And it never actually aired on TV how they won the belt. So if you're in the crowd, you're like, wait a minute, they didn't have the belts 2 matches ago. What is this? So I appreciate that continuity to the fan. But when I read that Challenge is going away, I think about my old pal Bruce, because you had a soft spot for Challenge, and to hear it's going under finally had to be a little bittersweet for you.
Yeah, by this time I hated Challenge.
But when you first came into the company, it was one of your first projects, right? But way back in like 87, 88?
Yeah, I mean, they all were, but it was Challenge was probably the lesser of all the evils, and it was getting to work with Bobby and Gorilla is what made Challenge fun.
Right.
So, but it was also just Challenge, and it was kind of viewed upon by everyone in the company a little bit as, it's just Challenge.
All right. Here's some news.
It was the redheaded stepchild.
King Kong Bundy is still with the company. He missed the tapings because of walking pneumonia, and Henry Godwinn was given his spot and his push, including Bundy's original match against Bam Bam Bigelow on July 23rd. Bundy's being phased down because it's been readily acknowledged his matches have been poor. Although the weekend he worked against Bigelow on top at the B shows in New Jersey, which drew 12,000, 20,000, and 25,000 respectively. The A-Team with Diesel and Sid in cage matches, and Undertaker and Kamala in casket matches with Jarrett and Shawn Michaels for the IC title drew 41, 55, and 105,000 in Columbus, Indianapolis, and Chicago. Bigelow and Baum broke the ring the first 2 nights. The first night the ring ropes broke, and the second night one of the metal supports broke. A lot to unpack here. First of all, the other show, I mean, these A and B shows, boy, they could not be different in the amount of money they're drawing, from 25,000 compared to 105,000. Do you totally contribute that to one piece of talent, or is it a combination of things? Is it the combination of Diesel, Undertaker, and Shawn, or is it mostly Undertaker? What do you, the Undertaker in a casket match is an attraction in any year, but in 95, it was even another level, was it not?
Absolutely. And it's attraction driven, but it's also market driven. And the B shows were specifically, easy for me to say, marketed to smaller markets. And those were your high school gyms. Those were your just much smaller venues and smaller arenas. They weren't meant to draw that $100,000 gate. They were meant to go in and do $50,000 and get out of there with profit and move on to the next one. They didn't have the expenses of the A shows and the larger venues. So the disparity in what we drew, that was, you couldn't have drawn 100,000 in some of those markets.
Let's also talk about Bigelow and Adam Bomb breaking the ring. This is sort of post Hogan Kamala era, but still, two big old boys with Bigelow and Adam Bomb breaking the rings. Is this around the time you guys started to loosen up on the stiffer rings, or is this just the stiffer rings wearing out? I know there was definitely sort of a before and after of how the rings changed. And I think you've explained privately before that maybe some of that was Vince actually getting in the ring. But when you're seeing the rings breaking like this, it makes me sort of scratch my head and think, is this before or after?
No, this was basically, man, two big boys in there that were beating the shit out of the ring, and nothing more, nothing less. These were still the concrete rings, I like to call them. They were brutal.
How was Bundy to work with at this point? You know, but we're acknowledged here in the newsletter that his matches on top or have been poor, to say the least. And I know that you've always used the Ernie Ladd joke, but realistically, what was it like working with Bundy in this era? I mean, did he know that he wasn't meeting the mark for you guys?
I think that Bundy kind of at this time was in a bit of a time lapse, and felt that what he was doing was enough, but it just wasn't. He didn't have it anymore. He didn't care. And it just was, it wasn't good. I mean, he wasn't there. He wasn't the King Kong Bundy of old. The King Kong Bundy of old had some snap in his step, and this King Kong Bundy did not. Great guy. One of the funniest sumbitches in the locker room, but I don't think that Chris cared at this point.
Talk to me about Sid. Meltzer would write, expect Sid to be phased down from the top and Mabel to be given his shot at the top heel spot. Is Sid just becoming less and less reliable? Does it feel like he's not gaining the traction we wanted? Why is Sid coming down and Mabel going up?
Cycle of the business sometimes. And we had heard rumblings that WCW had something big planned with Mabel as the third man.
Oh, Jesus.
And we wanted to get ahead of that.
Let's talk about something that really jumped off the page of my research.
Well, I read it in the Wrestling Observer. It's got to be right?
The WWF is starting its own newsletter by put together by Vince Russo, who did a terrible newsletter of his own 3 years back, which lasted all of a few issues. Actually, WWF could put out a very profitable newsletter if they did it correctly, but the ability to give up the BS is virtually impossible within the industry, and that's their biggest handicap. What do you remember about Vince Russo potentially running a WWF newsletter?
Oh God, we talked about through different times, different machinations of all the newsletters out there, and well, shit, why don't we print our own gossip and our own news? This is just another one of those times, but I think, having Vic Venom be your dirt guy just doesn't do wonders to the credibility of something. Not that having the name of Dave Meltzer lends any credibility to anything either. Actually, Vic Venom probably would have been more credible than Dave Meltzer, but yeah, just one of those discussions of what ifs.
Let's also talk about, since we're cutting costs, how we're reinvesting some of that newfound wealth. Meltzer would write, the WWF blimp costs $250,000. They're going to send the blimp to different cities ahead of time where they run live events. What the fuck is this?
Oh my God, that was cheap. With the amount of publicity that we got from that blimp and being able to travel all over and get on major networks and be sitting up there next to Fuji or Goodyear blimps at major events. We had a lot of exposure with the blimp, and that was something that you know, a lot of it you could never pay for. A lot of that exposure you could never get by just going out and buying it.
Did y'all buy that blimp from Lou Pearlman?
Who's Lou Pearlman?
You know, the guy who did NSYNC and all those other boy bands. Before that, he made his money selling blimps to people like Jordache and I don't know, a bunch of others, McDonald's.
I don't know. Just rented it. We rented it. We rented the blimp for the promotion. It was the brainchild of a gentleman named Bob Collins. And again, it got so much publicity, and the exposure was worth well over the $250,000.
So you think it was a success?
I do.
Wow. Do you think it would work now?
If there were enough live sporting events going on all over the country, yes.
Let's talk about some injuries as we head towards the pay-per-view. Meltzer would say that Tom Prichard is out of action with a knee injury. Brody missed the weekend due to being banged up in an auto accident, but he'll be back this week. Meltzer even says he's going to get a huge push as a face, it appears, since on TV this week they were already referring to him as having so much charisma. I can't wait to talk about what could have been there. He would also say, expect Waylon Mercy to get a huge push as the character has been well received. Rad Radford got a badly bloody nose in his match with Fatu in Columbus. Fatu went over in Radford's first house show matches. Some of our listeners may not be familiar, but Rad Radford is Louis Spicoli, who we would see later in ECW. And then of course, last in WCW before we lost him way, way too young. He was like a child prodigy almost at wrestling, was he not? I mean, he was signed with y'all when he was very, very young.
Yeah, he was. Louis was someone out in California that always came to us, and he was part of that Bill Anderson and Louis Hernandez. I think it's Louis Hernandez. I know I just screwed that name up. I can picture him. Good Lord, Bruce. Anyway, Louis was part of that group, that Southern California group, and a hell of a talent, hell of a worker, just a little immature, I think was the...
So when you say Southern California, I think of Rick Bassman and Roland Alexander. Either one of those?
No, no. God, no.
Okay.
Roland Alexander was San Francisco. It was Billy Anderson and Jesse Hernandez, something like that.
Meltzer would also continue the talk of Dr. Death. He says negotiations with Steve Williams are still alive, but he's neither agreed to come in or turned anything down. But if he came in, he would surely get a push. Who was pushing for Dr. Death here in 95? It couldn't have been JR at this point, right?
If JR was breathing, he was pushing for Dr. Death.
I'm saying he was playing hokey pokey with the company at this point.
Yeah. But still, if he's breathing, he's pushing for Dr. Death.
Okay. Let's keep it moving. I do want to ask, we talked about it sort of at the top of the show. Do you think Hulk Hogan Vader as a main event was of any concern to Vince? I mean, that feels like sort of his old formula. Hulk Hogan against a big nasty heel. Was that considered stiff competition, do you think, this month?
At this point, the shit they were doing really wasn't. And it was just another, rehash. It was the same formula that we had followed for years, Hogan against the big monster. That was Terry's story, and that's how Hulk got over. So go back to the formula that works.
Let's talk about, I know this sounds weird, but you've often said that sometimes you would watch these WCW pay-per-views with like Pat Patterson or Howard Finkel. Did Vince ever watch a WCW pay-per-view with you guys? Would he watch it at home, or did he not watch the other stuff at all?
From time to time, he would watch a pay-per-view, yeah, or one of their specials, TBS specials, something like that. But it wasn't a regular deal, no.
A couple weeks after they were let go, Meltzer would write in the newsletter that after those key executives, quote unquote, and the head of public relations and the head of marketing, meaning Steve and Rex, were let go, a lot of wrestlers who are working, quote unquote, on bottom are worried about their jobs. Apparently there'd been discussion of doing this even before WrestleMania, but it wasn't until last week when it happened. Do you think Vince was sort of reluctant to make these cuts, and it wasn't until he knew that King of the Ring was not the boom that he hoped? Maybe he thought originally after WrestleMania, okay, that didn't draw the buy rate, but maybe we can pull the nose up on this thing by June. And then when it doesn't happen there, it's just time to get to business.
Yeah, I think that, look, all the time you're going to run into situations where business isn't what you want it to be. And yes, we need to turn things up and we need to change things around a little bit. That's business, and you just have to reevaluate and constantly reevaluate and reinvent as you move along.
Well, it's funny because, you've got sort of mixed messaging. King of the Ring does a 0.65 buy rate, which Meltzer would say would make it by a sizable margin the lowest rated WWF pay-per-view in history. That would indicate what Vince is calling 150,000 buys for a $1.6 million company gross. Meltzer would say, if 1 year ago you told me the UFC would be beating a WWF pay-per-view, he would have doubted it. And the gist is, at the same time, while pay-per-view is down, we're doing some decent numbers live. The live gate for the show at the Spectrum was impressive. There's 16,590 folks in the building. 14,142 of those were paying. The gate is $311,680. That's the second largest gate of the year, only behind WrestleMania. How do you reconcile this where fans will turn out in droves for you to see you in certain markets, but the pay-per-view is just circling the drain? Is it just, you had a poor lineup? You did a poor job promoting? What's the lesson Vince learns in a moment like that?
Well, obviously you didn't have an attraction that people wanted to see. And it was also new to do the monthly pay-per-views. So people had not got into the habit yet of monthly pay-per-view and, okay, I need to budget my money here and I need to do this. We weren't there yet. So I think it's just a combination of a lot of things. And that, brand new all-night gas station opened up down the street.
Oh God, I love when you do that. One more thing, or I guess a couple more notes before we get to the pay-per-view. Meltzer would say, speaking of WrestleMania, one of our readers bumped into Lawrence Taylor's this past week, who made it clear he'd never wrestle again, saying it was the biggest mistake of his career to do so. I don't know how much I believe somebody bumped into somebody. I understand that that's easy to shit on, but I've never really heard Lawrence Taylor talk about wrestling, or his experience. Have you talked to Lawrence or ran across anything where you got an indication whether or not he felt like it was fun or had a good time or worthwhile or successful, or did he just regret it?
Well, I can only talk to my personal experience with Lawrence, is that he absolutely loved the experience that he had with us. And it was a dream come true to him because he had been a fan his whole life, and he had a shitload of fun with the build up, the training, all the way to and through the match. So, no, I never heard that. And I doubt anyone else did, other than somebody saying, hey man, boy, that sure was a mistake what you did at getting in the ring at WrestleMania, and you must have hated that. And for them to just say, Lawrence not knowing what the fuck they're talking about, saying, oh yeah. There's a lot of negative people that will only hear and say the negative, that's what they're going to want to believe.
Let's talk about morale. Meltzer would say the morale on the road is really bad. And I'm told the majority of the wrestlers right now are trying to do as little as they can to get by, which makes sense for lackluster house shows. Would you say overall that morale was down here in the summer of 95? I mean, we're seeing folks let go, record low pay-per-view numbers. Do you think that morale was low, not just in the office, but amongst the talent?
Yeah, I do. I think that the paydays were down. I think that, overall, anytime that pay is down a little bit, the guys start talking and guys start buzzing about, oh, what's next? What are we going to do? So sometimes the morale is like a roller coaster. They'll go and they'll be good one moment and bad the next.
Let's talk about something that's going to be good forever. Meltzer would say they'll be filming another Jeff Jarrett music video in Denver at the Grizzly Rose on August 11th. They will introduce a line dance called the Double J Strut. Now we know, based on what's going to happen tonight, that's never going to happen. What were the original plans for the line dance, the Double J Strut?
Ha ha ha! Well, you didn't do the Double J Strut? That was where you were going to find out who the true singer of it was, because by God, here's a scoop. Double J didn't sing that. Well, Double J did sing it. Just wasn't Jeff or Jarrett.
Let me admit something now that I can't believe I never got until right now, but we've been talking about Bret Hart, and as you like to call him, the pirate, stealing his jacket, and that being a worthwhile, use for a feud. I mean, you and I argued about that once, and the next big thing, Mance Warner texted me and said, I'd whip somebody's ass if they stole my jacket. You're wrong. Bruce is right. So just saying, people are agreeing with you about the jacket thing. This is in the Observer, and I laughed out loud when I read it. They're doing an angle where WWF wrestlers are supposedly having things stolen from the dressing room, in which apparently will wind up, it will be Jean-Pierre Lafitte to get over his pirate gimmick. It wasn't until I read that sentence that I realized the reason he's stealing stuff is because he's a pirate. It's tremendous.
That's a pirate. Well, that's a fucking, now hang on.
I know. I never thought about
that's
what a pirate
pirates
does.
do. And I told you that.
They steal booty. I got it.
Yes.
All right.
You cannot trust a pirate.
Clearly. There's a lot to unpack here on the show. I want to get to it, but I also want to talk about some news and notes, because the gist is Titan's in bad financial shape. Titan Sports has lost millions of dollars over the past few years due to a combination of major decrease in revenue from house shows, a decline in pay-per-view buy rates, major legal bills, and high real estate bills. And rumors went around wrestling like crazy over the past week about how serious the condition is. Although there was no way to really know what the long-term effects are, the two indications are that Titan was really in trouble would be for the McMahon family to sell a percentage of the company to outsiders, which hasn't happened, in order to raise funding. This is something that believe the McMahons would only do as a last resort. The other real sign of danger would be a move from Titan Towers to a less expensive office setup. Since neither has happened, I don't take any of the talk of impending doom too seriously. Although clearly this is a company facing a major downsizing, as Jim Crockett Promotions in 87 and 88 and the UWFI in 94 and 95 showed, it doesn't take long for a wrestling company that looks to be thriving on the surface to get financially overextended and cease to exist. The thing that sticks out to me, because we've talked about almost all of this so far, but high real estate bills, was it often thought of at the time that Titan Towers was an albatross of sorts? Man, this is such an expensive, fancy building, and maybe we're overspending here.
I don't think so. I mean, again, we needed office space, and it was not like, oh, hey, let's move over to this office building because it's fancy office space. It was, we needed to move because we had grown out of the several offices that we were in at the time, and to be able to consolidate the office into one building, excluding the studio at that time.
It's pretty remarkable that the news of the WWF's sort of poor financial state really gets out there and becomes a story when a lot of the PR people are let go, because that's usually who the media is communicating with. So multi-channel news would even do a story on the dismissal of Skip, who had been the head of Titan's pay-per-view department, as quote unquote being well respected within that industry. And as a result of these news stories, some cable operators begin to question hey, is our cash cow leaving? Because they've really been the juggernaut of pay-per-view for a long, long time. And I don't know that maybe that was, not something Vince thought about, that, hey, our spokesperson who's handled all this media spin stuff for us for so long, if they're gone now, maybe this gets a little more rampant. Clearly they survived. Didn't really matter, but there are going to be a lot of other names who are going to be on the outs. Even more questions about the financial stability of the company were being asked after all sorts of rumored wrestling cuts took place this past week. While a complete list is not yet available, those believed to have been dropped include the former Barbarian, whose position was dropped when Fatu was made a single, managers Alpha and Lou Albano, Doink and Dink, television announcer Stephanie Wyand, Duke Drose, and road agent Tony Gurria. There are many other names that are expected to be dropped between now and September, the biggest names on that list being King Kong Bundy and Hakushi. In addition, Mantar, the Heavenly Bodies, and Techno Team 2000 will be phased down and get limited, if any, bookings after a few more weeks. The only real surprises to me on the list are Doink and Dink, and even though the gimmick has more than run its course, the WWF has merchandised them heavily and even brought forth a lawsuit against Matt Osborne a few weeks ago to enforce their trademark. Talk is that there will be less B shows in the future to go along with the cutback in television costs, going from 51 TV tapings down to just 26 TV tapings. Man, a lot of heads rolling here. Lou Albano sticks out to me, and Tony Gurria as being longtime WWF guys. What do you remember about them getting their walking papers here?
Well, that's probably about the 100th time that Tony had gotten his walking papers. The same thing with Lou. But they were, look, making cuts is not easy.
Right.
And it's extremely unpleasant. Sometimes you have to look at your bottom line, and you have to look at your roster and everyone in the company and what have you. And sometimes you have to make cuts. They're hard. They're unfortunate. They affect people's lives. And it's not something that's just flippantly done to just say, okay, we'll get rid of these guys. You have to put a lot of thought into it, and you have to also accept the responsibility when you do make cuts and move on. But you have to do what's right for the company at the time.
Let's get to the pay-per-view. We're finally here, July 23rd, In Your House 2. It's the Nashville Municipal Auditorium. Meltzer would say it was an easy thumbs up, although he was a little surprised by the responses from the readers. He says, I've seen plenty of better WWF and WCW pay-per-view shows that didn't get anywhere near the level of positive response that this show got. I'm not sure if that's an indication of decreasing expectations, and thus one outstanding match, 3 better than average, and 2 bad matches constitutes an excellent show nowadays, or simply that people vary their responses based on the price tag. And since this show was only $14.95, less is expected than the other shows. But in comparison to King of the Ring, the WWF rebounded big time. In fact, the readers of the Wrestling Observer gave this 88.7% thumbs up. So if that's any indication and you haven't seen this show, go out of your way to go watch In Your House #2 on the WWE Network. 88.7, that's pretty damn good. Thumbs down is only 4.4%. Thumbs in the middle is 6.9%. There was one dark match that night. It was Skip beating Aldo Montoya in the opening dark match. It's about 4 minutes. Montoya is going to come off the top with a crossbody block, and Skip rolls through holding the trunks. Meltzer was told it was all action, but too short, and gave it 2 stars. Let's get started on the show. We should mention that Meltzer said the crowd estimate was between 6,500 and 7,000 fans here. WCW had sold out the same building in December for Starrcade, but that was the stinker Starrcade. Hulk Hogan was on top. He was wrestling the former Brutus the Barber Beefcake, but still, it was historically a big show for WCW, so it sold out. So not quite a sellout here, but not the worst crowd. And they get a good show here. Rhodey's going to pin 1-2-3 Kid in the opening match in 7 minutes and 26 seconds. I think this is a really great match for both guys. You get to see the charisma for Rhodey really for the first time in the ring. And 1-2-3 Kid, I think, is at some of his very best work here in 95. I really dug this one. Meltzer did too. He said it was damn good and would have been even better if they would have been given a little more time. 3.25 stars. And Rhodey goes over because they got big plans for him. What'd you think of the match, and what'd you think of the Rhodey as he starts to sort of come out of his shell here?
I thought it was excellent because it told the story exactly what we wanted to do. And that was to show that Rhodey was someone that was able to hang and give him some credibility in the ring. He had been pretty much, that bit part player for Jeff Jarrett. And Rhodey at the time, man, was, goddamn, he had star written all over him. And we just wanted to get him out there and get that ball rolling so that when it was time to let him out of the gates, he was ready to rock and roll.
They're even going backstage twice during the match to show Jeff Jarrett in his dressing room paying no attention to the match, just all into himself. And he's supposed to care about his pal Rhodey, but clearly he doesn't. Next up, we've got Men on a Mission beating Razor Ramon and Savio Vega. They get 10 minutes and 9 seconds. And Meltzer would say this was probably the surprise match of the night, considering Ramon was in his first match back after missing 6 weeks with a rib injury, and Men on a Mission are usually awful. But he liked this one, 2 3/4 stars. And, he says, as Vega and Mo both went over the top, Mabel squashed Ramon with a belly to belly suplex for the pin. He says this was gutsy, but also logical booking, having one of the most over faces do a clean job to the heel ready for his title shot. It's something most U.S. offices have backed away from in recent years. 2 3/4 stars. And it is a big deal. Razor Ramon coming back, one of the most beloved characters, and Mabel pins him clean. What'd you think of this one?
Well, because nobody saw that coming, and nobody thought that would actually take place. I thought that the match was excellent, and to that degree, that credit, where it goes. It goes to Razor Ramon and Savio.
Of course.
But at the same time, Mabel and Bobby had to hang, and they did. So the other thing it tells you is that, all right, with the right opponents in there that are leading them through this match, they can go and they can keep up. So to me, it was a win-win on every aspect in it, and was a way to start the build of Mabel.
Next up, we get Jeff Jarrett doing the concert. Meltzer would say it was pointed out that the fat guitarist was Al Anderson, formerly of the band NRBQ, which was years ago connected with Lou Albano. The lip syncing was obvious when you were looking for it, but it came off great. This is probably one of the best quote unquote gimmick angles ever done. I mean, I really enjoyed this, especially because we've had so much fun with the song. And I think that Jim Johnston is out here, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think Jim was definitely out there.
The idea of doing this concert on the pay-per-view, is this a Vince idea? I mean, is this a Vince storyline is my point. We've often heard that Vince really focuses on certain acts, certain performers, certain storylines, and he really sinks his teeth into it. This feels like this could have qualified for one.
Vince was heavily involved in it, but this was also during a time where Pat and I had a little bit more free reign. And so this was something that we had developed for quite a while, and we're really looking forward to the payoff and then the next steps.
Next up, we've got Bam Bam Bigelow pinning Henry Godwinn in 5 minutes and 33 seconds with a cradle. Meltzer would say nothing with the match was wrong, but it was just kind of dead. 3/4 of a star. Is this just one of those Styles Clash deals? They both need a smaller guy to sort of build around a little bit.
Big time. It was just like two guys colliding in the middle of the ring, and then neither one really knowing exactly what in the hell to do.
It is pretty special when you think, hey, I'm going on last with Lawrence Taylor. I'm in the main event of WrestleMania. Fast forward a handful of months. Now I'm wrestling Henry Godwinn for 5 minutes, middle of the card. Next up, here's why we're really
They're on
here.
the card.
They are on the card. Tremendous match. 4.5 stars is coming up here for Shawn Michaels and Jeff Jarrett. Shawn's going to win the Intercontinental title. They go 20 minutes and 1 second. Really great stuff. Go out of your way to watch. This is Shawn when he is really in his prime. He's starting to really showcase what he can do. I think his best stuff is probably second half of 97, early 98 from a character, but in ring, man, it's hard to poke holes in Shawn Michaels' game here. And Jeff Jarrett holds his own. A really, really good show. for both guys. Meltzer's going to say Jarrett signaled for Rhodey to trip Michaels as he got whipped into the ropes, but Michaels reverses it and Jarrett was tripped. As he got up, Michaels hit him with the super kick for the pin. After a celebration with Michaels in the dressing room, they went back to the ring, presumably for the Jarrett Rhodey split, but it didn't happen. And later, Hendricks did a stand-up babbling about a phantom split. All right, a lot to unpack here. Bruce, what happened?
They went out, they did their match. Jeff did the job exactly as was supposed to be done. And then after all was said and done, Jeff called for Road Dogg to just pull him out of the ring, pulled him out of the ring. They went to the back. And, I believe that my exact words were, "What the fuck?" And they just kept right on walking, grabbed their bags and left the arena.
Meltzer would say the biggest story revolving In Your House 2 was just minutes after being involved in the two best matches on the show. Jeff Jarrett and the Rhodey quit the promotion. Details as to why are sketchy at press time, although it is known they were unhappy about the angle, which had been a major source of discussion over the past few weeks. Originally, during the In Your House pay-per-view show, when Jarrett was lip-syncing a concert of the song, there was to be a screw-up, revealing Rhodey as the singer. Between that and the screw-up in the IC title match, it would start the feud with them meeting and facing each other at SummerSlam. There was a lot of talk, largely based on how well the video was received, that doing a turn this early was premature. As it was, they did the turn, or at least were booked to do it, later in the show during the match where Jarrett lost his IC to Shawn Michaels with an attempted interference by Rhodey backfiring and then leading to the finish. Jarrett and Rhodey were supposed to do a breakup after the match, but just didn't do it. Instead, they went backstage and had Doc Hendricks in his lone appearance talk about the breakup happening backstage and a fight without it ever actually taking place. Jarrett and Rhodey simply both walked out of the building that night in the middle of the show. There are plenty of rumors as to why the two would leave together, since Jarrett, mainly from the video, was actually starting to show some charisma after a lengthy mega push that for the most part had been unsuccessful. There were also rumors with Jarrett's father, Jerry, working as a consultant to WCW, that somehow there's a connection there, and WCW is said to be interested in Jarrett, but it's not such a small matter to overcome that Jarrett has a WWF contract. Rhodey, who was also being given his first career break after being a jobber for WCW and Smoky Mountain as Brian Armstrong, from the looks of things, seems to be walking away just as his career was getting ready to take off. At the Raw show the next day in Louisville, they didn't give a strong impression that they were gone, but Vince McMahon did give away that Jarrett was lip syncing the previous night and left the impression Rhodey was singing, and said Jarrett would never sing on a WWF show again. My goodness. This is one of those, like, what stories, sometimes Bruce, people say, "Hey man, who else would you like to do a podcast with? Who else do you think you could have a great podcast with?" And I always say, I think Jeff Jarrett has a story unlike anybody else. I mean, let's not forget, this is the same guy who once, quote unquote, held Vince up for money with the whole China Intercontinental title thing. But now here, years prior to that, just walks out. What was Vince's reaction when he's looking around saying, "God damn it, where's Jeff?"
Not real happy. I wasn't real happy. My brother actually is the one that came up to Gorilla to tell me. He said, Jeff and Brian just left and said they quit. I was like, okay, great. And continued on with the show.
I believe the rumor over the years is Jerry Jarrett had given them bad information. And let's not forget,
imagine that
Jerry was fresh off of his run with you guys. He's no longer a part of the company, correct?
Who? Jerry Jarrett?
Yes, sir.
No.
So Jerry Jarrett, when Vince thought, quote unquote, he was going to prison, was around the company and would try to program some of the weekend programming where it heavily featured his son. His son now gets a big push, and so does his pal Brian Armstrong, but maybe they didn't like the creative, so they just walk out, perhaps thinking that Jerry has other ideas planned for them. And we know that that's not exactly going to work out. They've got to wait out Jeff's contract. And then of course, Rhodey's going to come back first, and They're going to try to repackage him and build it up. But man, Brian had a lot of momentum here in this show and was poised to do big stuff. Is this the definition of loyal to a fault? I mean, it hurt his career to leave here, and he had the biggest company with the biggest push behind him, and he just threw it away based on loyalty. Is that the way you think this can be summed up?
No, I would call it stupidity. I would call it just, naivete. Didn't think it through, believed in somebody that obviously had an axe to grind and had a history of just being Jerry Jarrett. So to that extent, that was, look, we all have to make our own decisions. And Brian and Jeff made a decision based on whatever information, whatever they were told and sold, if you will. I believe it was the wrong decision, but I also know from our vantage point that every step of the way that they were aware of what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, and had input into it. So it was a shock. It was a shock to me. It was a shock to Pat. But it also hurt. And that was one that hurt, because it's like, all you had to do was say, I don't want to do this, or can we do it a different way, or something like that, versus just saying, oh, well, Vince didn't talk to us and we didn't like the way it was going. And you never made an attempt, at least that we know of, to talk to Vince and or to tell him that. And you had many, many opportunities to tell us, and instead you yapped us to death, to the point that we felt everybody was on board and everybody was good to go. So to that, shame on you. And we move on. But it was not, wasn't received well by me. I can definitely tell you that.
Have you talked to Jeff about it in recent years?
Oh yeah. I mean, I talked to Jeff about it when he came back, and I've talked to Jeff about it over the years. I think we agree to disagree, and I think that Jeff realizes now that wasn't the greatest move in the world to make.
Right.
So being in a position of being a promoter and being in the position of trying to do a television show and work with a lot of talent, and then have someone treat you like that, all of a sudden you go, oh, wow, hey, maybe I didn't handle that the best way. So I don't agree with the way Jeff and Road Dogg handled it in any way, shape, or form. And wish it wouldn't have happened, because I think that the angle and the story that we had laid out would have been awesome.
There was some sort of, maybe I have this confused, but I thought there was a phone call that night, maybe from Jeff or Jerry, but somebody either called the office or called Vince, or maybe someone called Jerry's house. I forget. But the gist is Jerry told somebody, oh, they're in my hot tub right now.
That was Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett. And Lawler pulled us over on the side of the road to inform us of it, that Brian and Jeff were in Jerry Jarrett's hot tub drinking champagne. And they're they've quit. They're not coming back. They're going to start WCW. And that was Jerry Jarrett to Jerry Lawler, and then Jerry Lawler to us. So as far as, what they truly were doing, I don't know. Maybe they were, but good for them.
Well, I'll tell you this, Jeff went out on a high spot when it came to the readers of the Wrestling Observer. It was almost unanimous. The best match was Shawn Michaels and Jeff Jarrett. It got 159 votes. The only other match that got best match votes was Rhodey and 1-2-3 Kid. So the two guys who people thought had two of the best matches, and granted they're working with Shawn Michaels and 1-2-3 Kid, they're out of here, but the good wrestling has to end eventually. And it does. We get Owen Hart and Yokozuna retaining the titles against Lex Luger and Davey Boy. Meltzer would call this something of an upset. They get 10 minutes and 54 seconds. Finish would see Luger and Smith doing a double back suplex on Yokozuna. Luger has him pinned. Owen comes off the top rope onto Luger and puts Yoko on top. 2.5 stars. I mean, what did you think of the team of Lex Luger and Davey Boy?
I thought they were a good team, and it was putting listen to what I was about to say, the less charismatic Bulldog with a more charismatic Luger, but that wasn't the case. You had a better worker in Davey Boy, putting him with Lex to compensate there. Owen and Yoko was Owen and Yoko, and I thought they were both great. But the match, come on. I mean, Owen Hart had his working boots on and got to work a lot with Davey. So the match itself was good, and Owen could work circles around Lex and make Lex look like $1 million. Yoko always does this shit good, and I thought it was a damn good match.
Well, let's get to our main event. I bet you don't think this was. Diesel retains, pinning Sid in what Meltzer would call the blow off of their feud in a lumberjack match. It's 10 minutes and 2 seconds. Certainly not 2 stars. Meltzer writes, this would have been a negative star match if not for the lumberjacks. Sid manages to get worse every time you see him, and Diesel didn't look any good here either, but he's not exactly the caliber of a performer who can carry someone this bad. It was weird because Diesel looked so much taller and larger than Sid. The lumberjacks, particularly the heel ones, kept interfering to take attention away from the fact that these two simply can't work together. Finally, Diesel does a plancha, seriously, onto all the heel lumberjacks who caught him, but I'm sure he's still the largest man to ever try a stunt like that. At one point, Mabel squashed Diesel into the post and leg dropped him on the outside of the ring to set up an angle for the next pay-per-view, but Diesel kicked out of the pin attempt. After a lengthy chin lock, Sid hit the power bomb, and Sid was high-fiving everyone, so Diesel kicked out. Diesel backdrops his way out of a second power bomb, and Sid then for some reason goes out of the ring and starts fighting with all the babyface lumberjacks, allowing Michaels to come off the top with a double sledge to the head of Sid. As Sid stumbles in, Diesel hits him with a poorly timed foot to the face for the pin. 0.5 star. Holy shit, this was awful. God bless Meltzer for giving it a 0.5 star. But I do have to say, whoever put this together, whether it was you or Pat or whoever, adding the lumberjacks as garnish did sort of camouflage some of the shortcomings of a real Styles Clash with two monsters. I mean, both of these guys can have good matches with somebody like Sean Waltman or obviously Razor Ramon, of course, Shawn Michaels, but against each other, well, there's just not a lot you can do. So I did like sprinkling in the other lumberjacks. And I'll admit, I totally forgot that Kevin Nash ever even attempted a plancha. What'd you think of this match?
Ooh, rough. Not pretty by any stretch of the imagination. And it, thankfully it was short. There you go.
It was short. It's a weird time for the business here. But it's not weird to know that when it comes to the best match, it's Shawn Michaels. And when it comes to the worst match, believe it or not, Diesel and Sid came in second. Bam Bam Bigelow and Henry Godwinn, according to the Wrestling Observer, thought it was the worst match. What'd you think was the worst match?
It was, I would have to say it would be a tie, but for a main event, when you put that main event out there and that for the championship, that kind of outweighs it because of the position it was in. It just wasn't good. But thank God we did have lumberjacks. At least we had a lot of star power out there.
Well, it's remarkable to me that this show got 88% thumbs up, but it really is a 2-match show. It's just crazy to see at the end of that, 50% of those guys are gone. They just walk out here. What would you say of this show, Bruce? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle?
I actually thought it was pretty good. Again, if you just watch the last match, it may leave a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth. But again, I thought the show was pretty good. When you try to remove yourself from how miserable I was that night after the whole Jeff Rhodey debacle, I was pissed and miserable. So watching it again, knowing what's going to happen, and you kind of don't have as miserable feelings anymore. So I thought it was good. It was good.
After you see a performance like this from Shawn Michaels, does Vince come around on him even more? I mean, I know Shawn at different times had given him trouble, and we know that that's not done, but he went out here and had a tremendous match with a guy who's leaving and really helped steal the show. Shawn did. Does this just change Vince's opinion of him, or did he already have that high opinion? It just really further cements it.
I don't think that anybody ever didn't have a high opinion of Shawn's work and what he was capable of doing. So that just reinforces it every time he goes out there and steals the show, because that's what Shawn does. So this was an opportunity to show once again why Shawn was the man.
Let's get to Twitter. We let you guys ask questions at Prichard Show. If you've got questions for next week's episode, which is Great American Bash 2005, well, you need to follow us on Twitter. That's simple. It's at Prichard Show. Next week, as I said, it's Great American Bash 2005, which went down on July 24th. The main event of that show is JBL versus Batista for the World Heavyweight Championship. We've also got Rey Mysterio working with Eddie. And this is the famous thing where Guerrero's going to reveal a secret. That's okay. Anyway, this undercard, something else here. Legion of Doom taking on Eminem, Booker T working with Christian, Orlando Jordan with Chris Benoit for the U.S. title, Undertaker and Muhammad Hassan, easy for me to say, for the #1 contendership. The Mexicools working with the BWO. Can't believe that's a real thing. Melina and Tori Wilson. And as we said a minute ago, Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero. The deal here is if Mysterio loses, Guerrero is going to reveal his secret on live TV. That's what we're doing next week. It went down in Buffalo, New York, July 24th, and it's going to be in your ear holes on July 24th, the exact 15-year anniversary. If you've got a question for us, go ask it right now at Prichard Show. And that's how you can stay involved in everything that we're doing. By the way, I realized we had a lot of ads this week. I want to remind you, you can get all of our shows early and ad free over at adfreeshows.com. You would have gotten this show at least a day early. And as we said, without any commercial interruption. So join us in all the fun we're having over there at adfreeshows.com. There's some great bonus content over there, including video of JR and Tony Schiavone doing some road trips together. And maybe my favorite new thing, Eric Bischoff blasting people who have fired off on him in shoot interviews. I'll play a clip of said shoot interview and then he responds. It's gold. It's called Eric Fires Back. We've got a couple of new fun things coming your way. Stay tuned over at adfreeshows.com. But without further ado, let's get to some Twitter questions that you guys had about In Your House #2. All right, Bruce, #1, and this is a fun question for us. Rajiv wants to know, was there a possibility of a second house giveaway, or was that more of a one-time thing? I do think a lot of people watch the second In Your House thinking, oh, they must be giving away another house.
Maybe that was the reason we gave away the first one. So put that subliminally in people's mind, but no, that was never a option.
Pender J wants to know, did you guys sell a lot of these event specific shirts? It seems like they're cheesy, but cool at the same time.
Not really, but we didn't make a whole lot of them. You know what I mean?
Right.
They were there, but there weren't a whole lot to be had.
Steve wants to know, did you know at this time the 2-hour concept was flawed regarding the $14.95 price point? I believe is what he's asking.
No, I don't think it was flawed. I just think it was different.
The Rosen Coaster wants to know, were pile drivers banned in the company at this time? I'm asking because Rhodey wound up executing one off the second rope on 1, 2, 3 Kid. That looks pretty scary to watch back. If not, was there any heat on him for doing such a move?
Not that I remember. I don't think that the pile driver stuff was a little bit later.
Machu Spanks wants to know who dressed Mr. McMahon on this day and where did he get his wardrobe? You know, I understand what he's hinting at here. Does Vince have a personal stylist who prepares what he's going to wear on camera for him?
Yeah, that would just be Vince McMahon.
Okay, there you go.
You want to know what's scary?
What's that?
Is my daughter just sent me a picture of Billy Gunn holding her in about, let me think here.
3 weeks ago?
That's not funny. She's about 4 or 5 months old on the beach in one of those wrestle vessels.
Oh, wow.
That's hilarious.
Rajiv wants to know, do you think this is Jeff Jarrett's best match during his run with WWE? I think it probably is. What say you?
I think it probably is too. It was incredible.
Brent says, we hear stories of Vince telling commentators what to say through the headphones during a pay-per-view, but when he was on commentary, who's giving him something to say? You sort of hinted earlier that you were in Gorilla. Would you have been giving him things to promote or little notes along the way, or who would have been in his ear, if anybody?
It'd usually be me.
Instagram or Wrestling Historian wants to know who would have won with Jesse James and Jeff Jarrett at SummerSlam 95 if they hadn't quit. I guess the idea is, would that have been the start of the feud or would that have been the blow off? Like, are they going to keep that thing going or do you think that would have been it?
No, we definitely would have kept it going. So, that probably just would have been the start of it. That probably would have gone to at least Survivor Series.
Rory wants to know, was there ever a consideration of adding a Russian like perhaps Nikolai Volkov to the team of Bulldog and Lex Luger and making it an allied powers with multiple countries represented?
Who's that from? Nikolai?
I don't think he's sending questions anymore.
Oh, okay. No. Yes, actually, yes and no. There was talk of just doing kind of an international deal, but never anything more serious than that.
Mike G wants to know, how did paydays work for talent who were there just being lumberjacks on a card? I know that's way in the weeds, but that is a pretty good question, Bruce, because we've always heard that, man, the pay-per-view payoffs are what you live for. But if you're a lumberjack, I mean, yeah, you're kind of involved in the main event, but not really. How does that work?
I mean, you get paid just like any other day.
Well,
you get paid.
Bobby Salsa wants to know, and we got this a lot. Can you name one good lumberjack match? Thank you. Because a lot of people, and I'm not saying there isn't one. I think he's legitimately asking you, can you name one? Because a lot of people think this is perhaps the worst possible gimmick match, but I thought it worked in this instance. Where are you on lumberjack matches? And do you have a favorite?
I don't know that any one favorite stands out in my mind, but I do enjoy lumberjack matches when they're done properly.
Josh Clemens wants to know, what's the best part of the show and why is it Michael Hayes' description of the Rhodey Double J fight? I got to say, in hindsight, I do feel bad for our old pal Michael having to just pull some shit out of his ass here. Don't you?
Michael's used to pulling shit out of his ass though.
Okay. On that note, we're going to wrap up this week's episode and we'll be back next week. We're excited to talk about Great American Bash 2005. Don't forget, you can get all these shows early and ad-free over at adfreeshows.com. Until next week, I am Matt. Hey, it's Conrad. He is stressed, tired, and sleepy, and we are out of time.
Hey!
We'll see you next week right here on Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard.
Rock on.
You gonna go take a nap now? Have a good day, buddy.
I'll holler at you later.
See ya. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.